Audio Jungle.
I am the Divine Prince, Ty Emmecca, Pan-African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, Advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya, Bokur. I reside in this beautiful and legendary, historic Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana. So join me as I share food, music, culture, tradition, the rhythms, and the flavor of New Orleans voodoo. Respect the voodoo.
Hey, Wakusa, what's going on? It's your Ndugu, Shaka Jajaga Shakur, a.k.a. I'm Costa the Bush Doctor. Yo, I hate to put it like this. No, I don't. All right. Let me stop. Let me not start like that. Start again. My brother Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson said, if you don't want to be an African, that's fine. But get the fuck on away from us. I feel the same way. We're not co-signing that bullshit anymore. And I really got to bang against it. We don't co-sign that anymore, man. We're not co-signing that. Nah, we're not co-signing we not African. We're not co-signing this, this distorted version of a foundational Black American. Because technically the term makes sense. But it's kind of like a lot of things in history that had one meaning and that were co-opted to give it a whole new meaning. That's what's slowly happening with the idea. Because technically, from my understanding, I mean, not just recently, I'm talking about back when I was a young man, my teens, I heard the phrase foundational Black America. And it just meant Black people who were born in America. That our foundation is here, Didn't mean we weren't connected to Africa. Didn't even mean we had a problem with Africa. As a matter of fact, it was just us identifying ourselves in the diaspora so that we could get to the conversation of Africa. But somehow that's been co-opted and shifted around to become like a MAGA group, like some kind of hate group. You know what I mean? Like xenophobia to the max. But I also see the hidden hand behind it because at the same time we're having a diaspora war here, in Ghana, you have the Nigerians and the Ghanaians fighting. And then Kenya just struck an ideological blow to Haiti by allowing everybody else to come in free of visa except for Haiti. And Kenya, 5 minutes ago, on one hand, Kenya is singing the song of African liberation in the spirit of Ibrahim Traoré and others, at least pretending to. And then on the same note, they went and invaded Haiti to where they're coming to help when we know that they're coming to exploit. And now it shows. So I see how the destabilization of African unity is being played out once again. It happened in the 60s and it's happening again. When you had people like, Nasser, you had, Ben Bella, you had, and it's the Arab side, right? And then you had Kenyatta, you had Jomo Kenyatta, right? You had Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Patrice Lumumba, all of these Black leaders rising up and declaring their independence from the West. And there was a pan-Arab movement that was forming in the so-called Middle East with people like Sadat and others who were pulling together the Arab population to pull them away from the European and push them closer towards the African in allegiance. Even though we've had beef with each other, they began to see that they have the same enemy. Muammar Gaddafi was the last stronghold of that understanding of pan-Arabism. Does not make you not African. You're on the continent of Africa. You are Africans, and you have blood of Africans. So why fight, right? And as soon as they seen that happen, they broke it up. It ain't no different when you had Bloods and Crips here in the 90s, pulling together to have peace, and you would have deliberate attempts by the colonial forces to break up that peace, to cause division amongst you. On a micro level, when I was in the New Black Panther Party, I remember we had unity with certain different groups, and small things would happen to cause rift between the groups. It's the same playbook over and over, and we don't get wise to it, so then we fall for it each and every time. So all I'm saying is nah, we're not going for it, man. Nah. We want African people. If you don't want, I agree with the statement, I'm quoting that brother. You don't want to be African, fine, but get the fuck on away from the rest of us that's trying to pull us together. Go on in your little corner over there, because what you're not going to do, is you're not going to trick the American black population into isolating ourselves from every other black person. Who are you going to get help from? You got us disrespecting the Native American, saying they ain't real, they $5 Indian, knowing damn well that's a term that they gave to white people who were paying $5 to get their name added to the bloodline so they can get a piece of the money, but you're using that to denigrate them. Then you saying you ain't with the white man either, and then you saying you ain't with black man or any diaspora of the black man. What the fuck you think gonna happen over here? They're gonna round our asses up. You know, our unity is in our strength is our unity. You know, point blank. That's where our strength lies, in our unity. And it's a systematic effort to break that unity up. And it's going to cause a rift. But you know what? I think that rift is long overdue here in the Black America. It's long overdue, man. It's at the point now we got to get back to the basics. Black to the basics, y'all. You either want revolution, which is complete constructive change, or you want to stay with the system. Because all that talking about what you ain't, I don't see what you are. Like, show me what you are. Because all I've been hearing for the past, not 5, not 10, 15, 20, 25 years is this divisional talk amongst blacks in America. I ain't this, I ain't that, I ain't this. But what are you then? What are you making happen with what you say you are? I haven't seen it yet, and I don't see it. Every time we get attempts to come together and build a unity, you break it up. Let me tell you something. I got love for my African cousins. When I was in Harlem, right, and I was in the New Black Panther Party, we have the African Day Parade, right? African American Day Parade. Africans in America Day Parade. Like it or not, that's what it is. And it's a beautiful thing in Harlem. And there were attempts by people to downplay that. I ain't doing it. But it went on nevertheless. And as a result of the influx of our African cousins coming into the country, they decided to have an African Day Parade to celebrate their culture, because it is a different culture. Which I was like, yo, I was down for it. So I went, I sat in on the meeting. We actually all went to the United Nations together. You know, and then we sat in on the meeting with them, people from Senegal, Ghana, et cetera, et cetera. And I was honored, man, when they asked me to be like the procession lead, if you will. The representative, the word is slipping my mouth, the representative for the Africans in America as a show of Pan-African unity. I wore that little sash with pride, still got that sash. So I know the Africans on the ground that are really working to build unity. And they're working hard, and they're risking it all. And I know the Africans in America, quote-unquote African-Americans, who are working hard to build unity. I know the West Indians who are working to build unity. I know people from the UK who are working to build unity, from Ghana, from Australia. I know blacks in China and Japan who are working to pull us together around the world. I know them personally. I work with them personally. Man, I'll be damned if I'm going to sit back and allow this government-funded, mentally funded, maybe financially too, but this government mentally funded psyop or operation to destroy our unity just fly over like it ain't nothing. Can't do it. Not with all the people who have sacrificed. You say I don't fuck with them African. Well, there are a lot of your foundational black Americans who died protecting African culture. I'm not even gonna get into what this, because y'all don't make sense, so I can't give you a sensical or a sense-based, common sense-based, intellectual-based, rhetorical, because you don't make sense. And we just gonna go around in circles. So just take your self-hating ass over there and let us be, man. You don't want to be us, fine. Go on over there. Let's do something different. Go play. Let the rest of us work on saving ourselves. Stay off my page if you don't like it. My page is only for Africans who understand our global connection. This is a Pan-African page. That's right. A revolutionary Pan-African page. This is a black nationalist page. This is a red, black, and green page. If you ain't with it, fuck on out of here. Straight up. And I'm saying it just like I mean it. No more dressed than nice. You ain't got no time for that. You know what I mean? So if you want to bring your Irish blood, Indian blood, oh, that's your blood. I got it too. That's your blood. That's for home discussion. Over here, we're talking about blackness. And if you ain't with blackness, stay off my page. Be defriend me or whatever it is you push your little button and get rid of me. Hocus pocus, alakazoo, alakazam, get me up out of there. For real. You know what I mean? You ain't got time for it. I got more days behind me than in front of me, and the ones I have in front of me, I'm going to spend completing the mission. I spent enough days fucking around, fucking up, and not completing the mission. Back on track. Inclusive. Love you.
When someone ran their mouth, we didn't fight, we froze them. Write their name on paper, fold it 3 times. Sprinkle alum, soak it in vinegar. Wrap it in foil, shiny side out, straight into the freezer. For heavier work, we use lemon. For liars and slanderers, cow tongue. Sew it shut with 9 needles. Tie their words cold so they could never speak harm again.
Greetings, greetings, honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Brought to you by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. 2026 New Orleans International Voodoo Day promises an inspiring and immersive experience with a diverse lineup of engaging events. Highlights include an educational symposium featuring distinguished speakers from around the world, including a delegation of scholars and spiritual leaders from Benin and Haiti, as well as art exhibitions showcasing voodoo-inspired works by talented local and international artists. The event will also feature a children's program and an Afro-ecological exhibit exploring the sacred nature of plants in voodoo, their role in spiritual practices, and their connection to our ancestors. The weekend will culminate in a ceremonial procession to 9 significant sites throughout the city, locations where the enslaved were brought ashore, held, auctioned, and where they later found community and built culture. This journey will begin at the transatlantic slave route to New Orleans marker on the moonwalk at the river and conclude with a traditional voodoo ceremony at Congo Square. Additionally, visitors can participate in interactive workshops, community discussions, and opportunities to connect with practitioners and cultural experts. This multifaceted celebration offers something for everyone, creating a meaningful space to honor the past, celebrate the present, and inspire the future. And we're certainly grateful for your weeknight, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time participation in this podcast. We're certainly grateful for your continued participation and support. Greetings, S. Marie. Thank you so much. Nina Lloyd. Greetings and salutations to you and yours. Good evening, Ray Alexander. And of course, Lydia Martin. Thank you so much for being present. And I'm joined by my co-host, Green Soap, Elder Reggie, and I will open his mic momentarily. In the last podcast, I stated that we would move on and begin the interracial interaction in hoodoo culture, forming an American tradition. And while voodoo may have been largely eradicated in its original form in the American continent, many of the practical traditions involved in it survived and blended with Europeans and Native Americans. Documentation addressing the cultural and spiritual practices of the races usually manifests itself in 2 ways: African to European and vice versa, and African to Indian and vice versa. For the sake of clarity, it is necessary to divide the understanding of exchange between the peoples of America into 2 sections outlining their similarities and instances of exchange. However, it is important to keep in mind that it was the combination of beliefs of all 3 of these groups that led to the modern incarnation of hoodoo and conjure in the United States. And while mainstream white culture has often forgotten the folk traditions of medieval Christians in Western and Central Europe, their practices were in many ways similar to those of African priests and conjurers. The syncretism of practices between these 2 groups of people may have allowed for some of the elements of both traditions to survive in America as one. Hoodoo culture, it is important to note, did not grow solely out of voodoo in America. It combines methods of practice involved in the Kingdom of Dahomey, as well as the Congo region in Central Africa. It is the magical practice within voodoo that are very similar to that of European, mostly English cunning folk, and allowed for cultural exchange. And while history often overlooks the supernatural history of European people in favor of organized Christianity and dismisses their similar African counterparts as backward superstition, Europeans do have a rich spiritual tradition that in many ways runs parallel with that of the Africans they enslaved in the New World. In the centuries preceding the colonization of the Americas, the fear of witches in Europe led to the execution of 60,000 to 1 million people during the late Middle Ages. Witches were those believed to have made pacts with the devil and to possess supernatural powers, such as the ability to shapeshift, transform people into animals, bewitch cows to keep them from providing milk, and even murder their enemies through the manipulation of spirits. It is important to note, however, that like voodoo, European elements of American folk practices have their roots in religion. Christian folk traditions included the veneration of saints and lesser deities, the belief in spirits, and the use of sacramental charms and amulets in religious ceremonies. The folk religious traditions of the French, Spanish, and Portuguese were blended with those of African conjurers. The most apparent instances of cultural exchange, however, was between African conjurers and English cunning folk. Striking similarities between the practices of folk religious traditions of the Celtic people of Western Europe and those of Western and Central Africa are numerous and obvious, but what is often overlooked is the striking similarity through which these peoples assimilated their pagan beliefs with those of Christianity. And like the adherents to voodoo, Europeans, in particular the people of the British Isles, adapted many of their beliefs to accommodate those of Christianity. The presence of Christian missionaries in Europe led to the widespread conversion of the continent. However, it was not adopted in a purely scriptural or theological form, but rather through adaptations of pagan beliefs. Christianity was seen as an essentially polytheistic tradition, with God as the supreme creator being, and Jesus and the Catholic saints were conceived as the lesser deities with specific roles. The Christian devil was viewed as a kind of trickster figure. The pagan mother goddess was analogous to the Virgin Mary, and the horned animal gods of sexuality in pagan traditions came to represent demons and devils. This consolidation of the identities of certain spiritual figures, of course, is analogous to those of the Vodou and Loa of African and Haitian tradition. Even after the eventual Christianization of the British Isles, certain folk religious traditions continued in Christian worship. The worship of Catholic saints took on many magical religious elements. Offerings of food were left at efficacies of the saints, and relics played the role of what may be referred to as fetish objects in medieval times. Saints like the Vodou and Loa and Orisha were believed to possess the power to inflict and relieve disease and misfortune. Europeans and African culture or conjure in America. Aside from the underlying religious elements, European folk religious practices mirrored those of African traditions as well. European cunning men and African diviners often served as medical practitioners, and in many cases as detectives in determining the identity of a person who committed some form of infraction, typically theft or malevolent charm. One example of a ritual that would become a common practice in American hoodoo culture involves the use of both magical and religious elements to determine the perpetrator of wrongdoing. In order to determine the guilty, a key was placed inside a particular book. The Bible was usually chosen, with the names of the suspects written on slips of paper and inserted sequentially into the hollow end of the key. When the practitioner slipped, when the particular slip of paper with the guilty party's name was inserted, the book would wag and fall out of the hand of the person who held it. This ritual was later practiced in the Americas after taking on certain African elements. The Bible was suspended from a string and would wag itself at the mention of the guilty suspect's name. The underlying common factors of African conjure and European witchcraft are the power to navigate and manipulate the spiritual world to influence the present world and to bend it to one's will. Shape shifting, in particular, was a practice parallel in African and European tradition. Whereas European witches were said to have the ability to transform into cats and rabbits, African conjurers could also transform into cats, owls, and bats. The underlying notion of cannibalism was also present in both European and African tradition, which in turn led to fear of people with magical powers. However, it is important to point out that while cannibalism referred to the eating of human flesh for European witches, it meant a more figurative eating of the soul for African conjurers. Fantastic notions of and beliefs about witchcraft followed Europeans to the colonies, where witches were persecuted and punished as they were in the Old World. And it is interesting to note that 90% of the accusations of witchcraft were made against people in the Northern American colonies, while such accusations in the South were largely ignored. This may point to a much more tolerant position of people in the South to magical religious practice. Fear of witches was certainly still present, and certain benefactors, called witch masters, were often employed to protect an individual and their family from the powers of malevolent witch. This, of course, is an obvious parallel to hoodoo conjure doctor, who served as protector and curer of harm done by evil sorcery. There were, of course, those in both European and African traditions who practiced benevolent magic as well. White witches specialized in divination, protected spells and charms for luck and love. The practice of fortune telling or divination was also one that African and European folk magic shared. Playing cards were often used as a way to predict the future or diagnose illness. And we still see playing cards used to some degree in Haitian voodoo demonstration still today. And perhaps the most commonly shared practice of both European and African magical folk practices were the use of talismans and charms, as well as the use of herbs and medicinal plants. The Fon people of the Dahomey Kingdom used charms called bo as cures for disease and defense against other conjurers who may have wished them harm. Bo was revered and often fed with blood, liquor, palm oil, and various items made of corn flour and hot peppers. Bo usually took the form of everyday items such as soaps, pendants, and drinks, and were chosen for their ability to bond, knot, or peace in order to assert their roles as vessels of power and protection. In medieval times, Europeans would wear talismans with biblical inscriptions around their necks. The Agnus Dei, an amulet made of candle wax and blessed by the Pope, was believed to provide defense against assaults from the devil. Religious medicine was often practiced through the use of natural antidotes in conjuration with spiritual healing. For example, when a particular person was ill, it was believed that their social and spiritual condition was altered as well. often due to some form of infection by an evil spirit, often believed to be the devil, on behalf of a malevolent person. Thus, a person would have to divulge all of their social dealings in order for the healer to produce a remedy to break the connection of malice to cure them. This influence over the spirit world in order to heal one's person in the physical world is one possible example of how folk religious traditions is indefinable as this worldly religion. It does not seek to influence this world to determine one's place in another, but rather the opposite. The combination of both spiritual and bodily healing was so prevalent in the South during colonial and antebellum times that conjure doctors, often called root doctors, were often favored over white medical practitioners. Some root doctors petitioned local governments to be given the right to practice medicine formally. Other enslaved root doctors were even granted their freedom in exchange for the secrets of their medicinal practices. And I'm going to bring Elder Reggie into the conversation. Greetings, Elder Reggie.
Blessings, peace, divine prince.
That sounds.
Also everyone, yeah. Also everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, and everyone in the chat room. Divine, always a great topic. There's one thing I want to bring in that I see current in modern time, merging of hoodoo between, say, the Europeans, the Africans, and the Native American persuasion all coming in. But the one thing that I see a lot is almost, if you go online now, almost all people practice hoodoo read the tarot cards. That's emerging from a European perspective. And it reads, tarot cards are a powerful tool for insight and guidance, with each card carrying unique meaning that reflects various aspects of life and personal growth. Overview of tarot cards. The tarot deck consists of 78 cards divided into two main categories, the major arcana and the minor arcana. And I believe, I don't know how to read tarots, but I believe when people read the tarot deck, they get insight and they're able to add prescription, medicine, charms, or whatever they need to match up with that particular tarot card. I wanted to add that also. It's more of a modern thing, but it's still a merger of the three.
I started my practice as a vendor, selling incense, oil, jewelry on the street, and then moved into becoming an expert professional tarot reader. I use the tarot cards based on the symbology and the numerology and astrology implicit within the symbolisms on the deck. For me, it was not, I see, I feel, I sense. It was very specific and very direct messages through the numbers, but also through the multiple symbols that are found in traditional tarot cards. Now, there are a lot of, what they call an oracle decks and other, totally made up decks that are available now that really have no connection to the ancient symbolism of tarot. I often suggest people access sacred texts, sacredtext.com, and you will find a complete chapter on tarot, its origins, its symbolism, and where that originated. Often the symbolism came from ancient Egypt and eventually made its way into Masonic symbolism. Now, many of my elders, during my times of being initiated and being mentored coming up, suggested that voodoo originated in the East from ritual practices in the area of Nero, Ethiopia, Egypt, etc. And then the traders carried the people and the tradition west to what we now know as Ile Ife. Ile Ife is considered the Mecca, if you will, the sacred city for West African spiritual, magical voodoo practice. whether you're in Nigeria, whether you're in Benin, etc.
Yes.
So that was a really important element to the conversation, Elder Reggie, that you are adding, particularly after us covering sort of the mixing of European practices and African practice, along with indigenous and Native American practice. When we think about smudging and burning sage, yeah, we like to say that's indigenous, and that's from the Native population. But we know they didn't wrap their sage, with string and form cones with it, and then put it in the stores. The botanicals took that on and sort of ran with it. But we see it now prevalent, in spiritual practices, even in cultural practices. We see some of our local Black and African and cultural organizations having events. There's often the involvement of prayer, burning of sage, cleansing and smudging folk, and the like. So we certainly appreciate that, Elder Reggie. That was a very good contribution to the conversation.
Yeah, we give thanks, Divine Prince. Divine Prince, I would like to read a paragraph from the book that I've done a lot of the background studying. Speaking of August 15th, we're going to be having a revealing of a marker that I, and others as a collective group came together to put for the city of New Orleans in honor of the New Orleans International Voodoo Day. This particular marker is going to be mounted at Esplanade Avenue and Dauphine Street for those who are in the New Orleans area. But I want to just read a paragraph to give a backdrop on why this marker is so important. And it reads, in the summer of 1866, racial tension ran high in Louisiana as a constitutional convention considered disenfranchising former Confederate enfranchising blacks. On July 30, a procession of black suffrage supporters on their way to the convention pushed through an angry throngs of whites. Words was exchanged, shots rang out, and within minutes, a riot erupted with unrestrained fury. By the time the army intervened later that afternoon, at least 48 men, an overwhelming majority of them black, were dead and more than 200 had been wounded. In his book, An Absolute Massacre, James Hollingworth Jr. examined the events surrounding the confrontation and shows that no other riot in American history had a more profound, a lasting effect on the country's political and social fabric. Thanks for allowing me to read that. And the particular marker that we are doing, it's going to remember that day and that event. A lot of innocent blood was shed. Personally, I like to coin it the first civil rights march in American history. The history books and the primary sources don't say that, but my deep dive into it says that. But the one thing I want to add is that these men, these marchers took that day, was blessed by what we call New Orleans Voodoo, because some of the men and some of the elements of that organization was active voodoo practitioners at that time. With that, I say thanks for allowing me to say that, Divine Prince.
Sure, all is a blessing, and it is.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to close out, but if you have a question, I'll answer it.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you to close.
Lest we forget, the spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that bind the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. And this is so true. It's still prevalent today. Like it or not, European Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, we all own this boat called America together. We have to find a way to try to make this work. With that, I say Ashe. Thanks for everyone's presence. Good night.
Before 1803, Louisiana's slavery wasn't American. It was French. Follow for the stories they buried beneath the sugarcane. In 1724, France passed the Code Noir, Black Code, to control enslaved Africans in Louisiana. But it wasn't just brutality, it was law. It dictated where they lived, what they wore, even how they worshipped. Catholic baptism was mandatory. Families, rarely respected. Any slave caught running away faced mutilation or death. Yet Louisiana's system was different. Africans and Creoles intermarried. Some gained freedom and built wealth. Yes, there was a black upper class in 18th century New Orleans. That didn't mean equality, but it wasn't the Deep South yet either. Then came 1803, the Louisiana Purchase. American settlers brought their own brutal system, and everything changed. Do you think America made slavery worse in Louisiana? Why do we rarely hear about the French side of slavery? Did you know about the Code Noir? Yes or no? This is just the beginning. In Part 2, we'll explore the sugar plantations of the river parishes, where death rates rivaled the worst on Earth. Follow now so you don't miss the truths hiding in Louisiana's soil.
Please, allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this right in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your shit. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Westside. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside. I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise." Do you hear hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.
We are the children of